Professor Sami Al-Arian, founder and director of SIGA, professor of public affairs at the Istanbul Zaim University, joins us now. Professor, thank you for joining us. You are, of course, now in Turkey, but your grandparents were amongst the victims of the catastrophe itself, the Nakba, who spilled, like almost 1 million others, into an exile which has lasted all this time. And therefore, I'm correct, I'm sure, in assuming that you are following events on the ground there with the utmost closeness. So tell us what you think of Israel's end game in this. I've just been discussing with a caller. What is it that they have in mind? Do they intend to try and transfer 5 million people out? Do they intend to try and illegally annex these territories, in which case, how will they answer the obvious apartheid point, which is inevitably will rise? Or will it be more of the same for as long as they can get away with it?
Chris, thank you very much for inviting me. Actually, both of my parents were born in Jaffa, Palestine, and both were exiled. Both were kicked out of Jaffa. And therefore, I am a son of refugees of the 1948. As far as the question you posed is concerned, I think it's very important to remind ourselves that Israel is a settler, colonial, terrorist state that was established, as you all know, on the backs of the Palestinians. We had the first Nakba, but throughout the years, the numbers of Palestinians, even though 80% of the Palestinians in the occupied territories of the 1948 were exiled, eventually in 1967, Israel was in control of the whole land, and now they have the whole Palestinians, half of the Palestinians actually inside Palestine. And today, that number, as you pointed out, is probably exceeds the number of Jews. So they had a problem on their hand. They're trying to take advantage of the resistance, because the Palestinians on October the 7th, it was an act of resistance. It was a prison break. That's what it was. And there were reasons for what happened on October 7th. We witnessed the biggest siege in the history, probably in this region and probably beyond. For the past 17 years, Gaza was under crippling siege. We saw that the new government, which came into power at the end of 2022, they were intent on not only taking over 60% of the West Bank and trying to expel the Palestinians, annex the lands, but also they were trying to take over the Al-Aqsa compound. We saw the Ben Gvir policies towards the prisoners. So when you put all these 5 reasons together, Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem, the prisoners, and the strategic point, which Netanyahu was trying to argue 2 weeks prior, that this whole region is actually going to become under Israel's hegemony, when he drew the map that's extended from India through the ocean and the Gulf and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Jordan and Haifa and back to Europe. And basically he was saying that we are in charge of this now. There is no longer something called Palestine. That's why we saw October 7th. But when you put all this all together, Israel found that there is a solution out of its quandary. They had a problem because they didn't want to have a 2-state solution. That train has left the stations. Now some are coming back. They don't have certainly one man, one vote, where Palestinians will have the same civil and political rights. So, and they don't want to be an apartheid state, because that's what they are. So they found a way to deal with this by committing genocide, by forcing the Palestinians to leave. And of course, that plan was given by Smotrich, who is part and parcel of the current government. He is the finance minister. He's in charge of the settlement policies inside the West Bank. And he said, basically, Palestinians have 3 choices. One, they need to be subjects of Israel. They need to recognize that Israel is a Jewish state and that they will never get any kind of rights. And they stay there at the discretion of the government. If they don't like it, then they could simply take some compensation and leave. And if they don't like it, then they would be considered as terrorists and they could be executed. These are the choices that Palestinians were given. The whole world turned their back on the Palestinians. And therefore, Israel thought that with the support of America, because America not only has been complicit in this genocide, they've been partners to Israel, is that they can actually commit another Nakba. They could actually force at least 1 million from Gaza. They've been trying for over a year and they have failed miserably. And now, of course, they want to establish a hegemony over the Middle East by thinking because they were able to get tactical advantages or tactical achievements in Lebanon that they could simply pacify Hezbollah. And now they're finding the hard way that this is impossible, that they cannot do that. And therefore, what Israel is trying to do is, again, trying to take advantage of what happened October 7th, take advantage of the weakness of the world's response, take advantage of America's complicity in this, trying to impose new realities on the ground. And so far, they have failed, and I believe that they will fail. They try also to take advantage of what happened across Iran. They were trying to end the nuclear program in Iran, but I think they also found the hard way that this is impossible without America's support, and America is very reluctant to lend its support, particularly in an election season. But more importantly, strategically, they couldn't even get Iraq. They couldn't get even Afghanistan right. If they're going to fight Iran, it's going to be a even more devastating for their strategic situation across the world. Add to that this international system that the U.S. has built since World War II is crumbling because of Zionism, is crumbling because of Israel behavior, and it's crumbling because of America's blind support to Israel. This whole thing is going to have a very important and great geostrategic implications, not only for the region, but also across the world.
There is I mean, how seriously do you take this Greater Israel talk? I mentioned before you came on, Smotrich recently threatened that Istanbul would be under the kingdom of the Jews. Maybe you should step outside and tell your fellow Istanbulians about that. But the idea that they could control an area that vast with 7 million Israeli Jews is, on the face of it, completely fanciful. Is it just macho talk on their part?
It's a pipe dream. I mean, these people are half crazies, if they're not fully crazies. When you listen to their talk, to their rhetoric, you don't think you're talking to or listening to rational human beings. And of course, this idea of having Greater Israel between the Nile and the Euphrates, this has been an old idea, and they know that they can't simply control this whole area physically. But I think what they've been trying to do is to try by proxy control the whole region, and they have been successful. Just listen or read the latest book by Bob Woodward called War. Just came out last week, particularly chapter 46, in which he talks about the trips that Blinken did right after October 7th, in which he met some of the Arab leaders, the autocrats in the region, and what their response to what happened then. And you would know that these regimes are pretty much controlled by Israel, by the Zionist regime. And therefore, they think that this could go on forever, that somehow they could be in control of the region because they're able to control few regimes here and there who are acting like American client states. But the fact of the matter is that the region cannot be controlled forever like this. And I think we've seen some examples of what happens when people start breaking out of their prison and determining to resist. And that resistance basically has been the answer, and it's widening. Now we can see it not only in Palestine and Lebanon, we can see it in Yemen, in Iraq, and Syria, in Iran, and I think in other places. It's not going to continue like this. And when you look at they're trying to impose and try to get us a sense of defeat. Defeat is a state of mind, and as long as people resist and they do not believe they are defeated, then there is no defeat here. And I think what we are going to see pretty soon is that despite all the carnage, despite all the killings and destruction of life, civilian life in Gaza, a small enclave has not been able to be pacified, and they want to control the entire Middle East by physically having it. They couldn't even control Gaza. They couldn't even today, after a year of absolute devastation. And I believe the death toll is much more than 52,000. I think we're approaching possibly 200,000 between killed and injured. And they haven't been able to even declare total victory in Gaza, and they are trying to somehow control Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and part of Saudi Arabia and Istanbul. That's just crazy, to say the least.
Fantastic tour of the horizon there, Professor. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. I do hope you'll join us again